Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of National Child Protection Week 2025. It's a hybrid event, so you're going to have to bear with us while we manage a few logistics. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we meet on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to just spend a moment to acknowledge the children and young people because this is where that proud and strong culture will live on. So welcome to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people online and in the audience. It's great to have you here today for these important conversations. I'd also just like to acknowledge a few, there's lots of really important and impressive people in the room, but I'd like to acknowledge the commissioners, Rachel Ward, the Children's Guardian, Helen Schneider, Commander at the ACE, and the panellists, but I'll introduce those in due time. So welcome to everyone online, welcome to everyone in the room. I think we've had over 700 people registered online, so we're going to try something a little bit different at the end of today. This is predominantly a networking event, and we're going to look at trying to have a breakout room so that you online have an opportunity to also network. So stay online. There'll be a Zoom link at the end of the session, and we'll see if we can master the logistics of that. National Child Protection Week is a reminder that protecting children is not the work of one organisation or one sector, it's a collective responsibility. This year, we carry forward the message that every child in every community deserves to be safe, supported, and given the opportunity to thrive. The theme for 2025 is about shifting conversation to action. We heard last year when we had Every Conversation Matters that young people said, we need more than just conversation. We need adults to take action on our behalf. So that formed the basis of this year's campaign. It calls on us all, policymakers, practitioners, educators, youth, media, and community members to play your part. Today, you'll be hearing from leaders across the sectors and importantly, from a young advocate who is doing her best in this space. Thank you. Her courage and her vision remind us that listening to children and young people is not optional, it's essential. I'm sure you'll agree after you hear Noria speak. I'd also like to just acknowledge and thank our partners, DSS, who fund us and make this whole campaign possible. It's really given us an opportunity to have a lot of important conversations across the states and territories, and we will continue to do that throughout the week. A few housekeeping items. The GoToWebinar platform is on listen-only mode, so you can't turn your camera on and you can't be heard. I'm always still pretty paranoid about that, even this long into it, but I promise you can't. There are closed captions down the right-hand side of the screen, and if we're talking about topics that are sensitive today, there are also phone numbers in the chat function that you can contact. There's also IT functions if you have any problems with your IT. So just call a NAPCAN staff member. We also will be taking questions online for any of the panelists. I'll keep an eye out for those. So if you want to send through those questions, please do. So thank you for everyone for attending this launch event on Monday morning, bright and early. We look forward to working together to ensure that the children's safety and wellbeing remain at the heart of everything that we do collectively together. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing our first panel member, Anne Hollands, our National Children's Commissioner. I'm sure that most of you know Anne. She's been a leading advocate for children and young people in this space. And I just want to hand over to Anne and ask you, Anne, to give us some reflections and some learnings that we can all maybe take with us today. So I'll ask you to come forward, Anne.
I end up dropping everything, bottles and phones and different things. So it doesn't mean that I've got a formal presentation or anything like that. I'm just it's easier to stand up. So I'd like to also acknowledge that we're on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and all First Nations people who are joining us in person and online today. Thank you so much to NAPCAN for inviting me to be part of this panel, and congratulations on another great week for us to focus on children. I'd like to also acknowledge all of you for the amazing work that you do in your own roles. Everyone here will have a particular focus on the safety and well-being of children, and you should be celebrated for the work that you do. I know many of you I've known for a long time, and I know that you've been working really hard on this. So congratulations to all of you, and in particular to the young people who are joining us, who are also doing that work, and many of them have lived experience of the harms that we're trying to prevent. So I thought, Lisa, that I'd just reflect a little bit on your theme and ask the question, what does it take to get action on child safety and well-being? What does it take to get that action that we're trying to get? And to use a recent example of that we've all sort of lived through in the last few months, and look at what we've learned. So I'm here obviously talking about the crisis in the early childhood education sector, where well, really for all of this year, we have been confronted with media exposés, and then increasingly with police action and so on, in a sector that probably we didn't hear very much about in these terms before. We heard that the current government was wanting to roll out a universal early childhood education system, that childcare was being made cheaper. We heard a lot about cheaper childcare, and we heard about better wages for the workforce. All of these things, of course, are really important, but really beginning with the expose on Four Corners back in March, that from then on it has been, if not a daily confronting story, it's been at least weekly, and that's been my lived experience over the last most of this year, that child safety and well-being has become a topic of conversation in this country in a way that it really, I don't think I've ever seen before. Right? So for those, I'll just say a little bit about what happened for those of you who maybe haven't followed it quite as closely as I have had to. It was largely the ABC, but then the News Corp publications got on board as well, revealing the various types of harms that kids were experiencing, have been experiencing for a long time in the early childhood education sector, and some of this earlier in the year was really terribly confronting. The images, the videos that that were broadcast, and the images that we saw were troubling. Would have been troubling to anyone, certainly to us. But in the media interviews that I did, I had people saying, "I'm not even a parent, and I'm outraged. I'm angry. What is going on?" So it rippled right across the country. And then, of course, in late June, we had the revelation of the terrible, tragic abuses in Victoria, or allegedly caused by someone who's now in custody. And as a result of that, we saw the Victorian Premier and Minister for Children, and we saw then the Minister for Education and the Minister for Early Childhood Education at the Commonwealth level step up in a very strong manner to say, well, we failed. They admitted that we had failed as a country. They admitted that we had waited too long to implement reforms that were designed to keep children safe, not just in early childhood education sector, but everywhere where they are, from 10 years ago, right? They admitted that, they said it wasn't good enough, and they committed to fast-tracking those reforms. And so, we actually have seen that happen. So we saw a rapid review in Victoria that's come out with a bunch of recommendations, that 22 of them that the Victorian government has committed to in full, to their credit. We saw the Standing Council of Attorneys Generals meet and commit to fast-tracking reforms to the Working with Children's Check. 10 years too late, but by Christmas we're going to have the what they call the band in one, band in all provision. So they're not going to be the same checks, they're not going to be harmonised yet, but they're going to at least, if you're banned in New South Wales, you'll be banned elsewhere as well. That's a start. It's the first step on the ladder, and there's an awful lot more to do. And that was quickly followed by the Education Ministers meeting that was only about a couple of weeks ago now, where it was probably, if you didn't see it, it was a historic and remarkable press conference that they held, where the federal ministers stood up strongly and said, we've got a whole raft of reforms that we've agreed to today, and the state and territory ministers also said we're going to work together, and commended the federal ministers for their strong leadership. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard such a thing before. I'm still a bit shocked this far down that this actually happened. And if you look at their communique, which I suggest you do if you haven't seen it, it has got a very long list of reforms that they've agreed to fast track. Some of them started on the 1st of September, some of them are coming in next year. And probably the most important part of that communique is where they talk about changes to legislation. Now, as you know, in Australia, we don't really have legislation to hold anyone accountable for the rights of children, and that's something that many of us have been arguing for. In this, they're going to change the law that governs the early childhood sector, and it says that the safety, the rights, and the best interests of children will be the paramount consideration in that law that governs the childcare sector. Now, that is a game changer. It tips completely on its head how the system has been, because we learnt that the system was geared towards protecting the adults, protecting the providers, and some would say protecting their profits, and of course protecting government administrations. And so now they're saying they're going to turn it on its head and put children at the centre. So that's the short version of a long story from the last 6 months. But so back to my question, what have we learned about what does it take? Well, it takes a number of things. It takes members of the public to stand up and to say, this is not okay. What kids are experiencing is not okay. It then takes leadership from the Commonwealth Government, strong leadership to bring everybody together across the states and territories, because we know that policy is very fragmented across this federation, and then to build that collaboration and for everyone to say, we're going to work together on this to make sure we're never in this place again. Yes, we failed, they said. Yes, we should have done some of these things 10 years ago when they were recommended, and we didn't do it. But now they've said they will. Right, and they've gone further. So to me, all of those things need to be in place to get the kind of action that we need to see. And as many of you have said, and I've said publicly, that while this is about the early childhood sector, that's not the only place you find children, as you know, colleagues. And we have equally, in the child protection systems and the youth justice systems, they are in chronic crisis every single day. And there's decades of evidence-based reports, decades of recommendations sitting on a shelf that have not been implemented. And we now need to use this moment, this very special moment where there's been a spotlight on child safety and wellbeing. We need to use it to get more reforms into those areas as well. For me, it's a bit like the Me Too moment that we had for women's issues, I have never seen a moment like this for children before. So I encourage everyone to use this moment to really amplify our unified voices for change for children, to keep them safe and well. Look forward to the conversation with the panellists as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, if you don't mind. I think one of the things we had an event in Parliament House last week, and we had a representative from Dance Arts Alliance, and it's and as Anne says, early childhood sector is not the only sector where there's unregulated children, and any place that children are accessing services. Dance Arts Alliance, there's 500,000 young people going through dance a week in Australia, and there's basically no regulation. So I think that we need to be looking at the back of the early childhood sector and go, okay, we need to expand these learnings because we're not done. And I guess one of the other things that we would like the sector to do to be on the same page around is just it's great the government has actually done the working with Children's Check, but it's a very, very small piece of that puzzle. So you can see lots of nods here, and I'm sure there are online. So that's what we're championing at this stage. I'd now like to welcome Tom. You can sit or you can come, whatever you want. We're pretty flexible up here. So Thomas Docking is the founder of the Man with a Pram and Dad's Group. He is the message of National Child Protection Week in person. He's a young man who, as a young family, well, he laughed then, but I think he still looks young to me. As a father of young children, he went, something needs to be done, and he took action. And I just, it's very inspiring. I'd like you to just come up here, Tom, and tell people about what you've been up to.
I will stand up because I put a suit on today. Normally I'm in boardies with just a checkered top on the top for the Zoom calls that I have to do. Thank you very much for having me, Lisa, and it's just an incredible opportunity to stand here in front of all you as leaders of leaders who have such a huge influence over the people doing amazing things to support children. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. I want to acknowledge the Yolngu people of Yirrkala, who currently have an exhibition here in Sydney, which is awesome. You should get along to see that. Arnhem Land, which is where I grew up in the Northern Territory. Many of my values and thoughts and my reason for doing what I do, I guess, is shaped in those early years. And for me, that's been growing up with the Yolngu people in Arnhem Land, with my family and also with the elders there who would sit under a tree. And they interestingly did some cool stuff like important men's business and important women's business. And they had this kind of acknowledgement that that was a thing and that was a good thing. And I've thought about that a lot in connecting with new fathers and realizing that intergenerational benefit of having grandfathers and fathers in the same space with their infants, and the magic that we see when that happens in terms of these people who may on a Friday night 6 months ago have been doing things that they are not proud of. However, in the context of Saturday morning, 6 months later with a little newborn and some elders around them, they're absolutely wanting to be the best version of themselves. And I think that's, for me, when I look at the sticker, which says, where's the sticker? Thank you. Shifting conversation to action. I think for me, it's in the home. It happens in our home with the people that we live with every day. And then walking out of our home and making that action. That happens for you as leaders of leaders. For me, just leading, in my little community. But it's the opportunity that we have at the policy level. That policy is never going to change unless the people who walk out of those houses with the conversation they had that morning, or in my case, the conversation I had with my incredible wife last night around reflecting around why we do what we do. Until we actually are there, this stuff is not going to change. And chatting to Anne just before, she's been here for decades. I don't mean that. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I don't mean that in the. Please forgive me, Anne. It'll take me years to dig myself out of that. What we were talking about was the fact that the research has been there. 10 years ago, I started the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium and these great minds of research. There's no new research that we need to protect children. There never was. It was the same thing as, thousands of years ago. How we do it, yes, we need research and evidence to build upon those things, but the fundamental truths are always there and they're in our hearts. And that's why I say the conversation to action piece actually happens with us in our homes. I'm privileged to, for the first time, be invited to Parliament House to represent the needs of new fathers. So just new fathers. Fathers, I'm sure, and I know have been raised in Parliament House before, but the importance of new fathers is a different thing. And I'll tell you why it's a different thing, because in the perinatal space, there is a time when a man, when he changes from a dude to a dad, he actually has this window where he's likely to accept some guidance. 2 years later or 6 months later, he's unlikely to accept that same guidance. And if that guidance is coming from a midwife, and my mum was an incredible midwife, and I grew up in that space, then he's likely to take on that guidance. If he meets someone there with lived experience as a father, like a grandfather figure or a father who's got some young people, the information he takes on it goes deep into his neural pathways. He's readjusting his neural pathways with the arrival of his newborn. And that is an opportunity we have to change the next generation. We also know, and I can't explain why, but the paternal impact of our fathers, your father, my father, whether they were present or not present, is disproportionately large on our life. I don't know why. There's plenty of research, but whether our father and our father figures, whatever they did or didn't do, the impact of that seems to be quite disproportionate on our lives. If you think about that, and I've spoken to thousands of different mums and dads, they've all indicated that, whether it was, a story of what my dad did that was questionable or what my dad did that was really fundamentally empowering for me, it was something that actually started to write their pathway and for their perspective in their life. Bizarre. Why is that important? Is because the next generation will most likely have the same perspective, as in the impact of their fathers on them will be, quite significant. And even if you believe it's less than lots or over this end of the spectrum, it is significant. And so we're going to work with that from a strengths-based perspective and go, okay, cool. So if that is significant, then when us as fathers go into the hospital and the health system doesn't see us and we feel like we shouldn't maybe really be there or we don't have a place there, and then all the social services thereafter also give us that same weird feeling, or the mums groups that we go to as the tokenistic dad gives us that same feeling, then it's possibly going to have an impact on our involvement in raising those children. And it's possibly going to have an impact of feeling like maybe I'm not the right person for this role. And I can assure you, mums and dads both have capabilities of doing what both do. And it's in the same way we've seen incredible leadership of women in this country, and all the places I go and the work I do, it's mostly empowered, powerful, and credible women who are making these changes for the children. And I'm so grateful for that, because my mum was like that. She was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and it's these women who are changing the space because they see it. But our responsibility is to acknowledge that, well, how is this health system left out a little bit important part? And I say a little because I'm not saying we need to shift all the focus to fathers. That would be ridiculous. I'm not saying march in there with a big blokey type approach into the midwifery, the birthing suite and say, okay, men are here to save the day. That is not the case. It's working slowly with midwives to co-design a way that's appropriate for that space, and in the playgroup space, and in the early years sectors, so that fathers have, it might be 5%, but it's an important 5%. And it's an acknowledged 5%. And it says, we're here, we see you, we value what you can do, and we're here to give you the tools and the resources to be able to do what you can do for these children. And the children will benefit from it, because us as fathers, and I say us because at different times, and I'm not sure about you, but at different times I've not been the best version of myself, and I haven't had the tools or the resources. And my lived experience has been, I can't do this. I can't do this. But someone, excuse me, someone said to me, they said, that's okay. And when they said that, um, I was able to go, okay, it is okay. And from there, I was able to grow the strength to be able to go through that and then help others. Excuse me, sorry. And now it's really exciting to be able to say to other guys, that's okay, mate. I hear you, I see you, and there is a pathway for this. And this, you're starting to do the deep work, and that invitation to come and do the deep work and shifting that conversation to action happens here, and it happens in our conversations in our homes. And I'm super passionate about that, and I'm seeing people here, here as well as across Australia, who are really resonating with that message, and they're actually stepping forward in their professional roles, and they're moving from professional curiosity to personal investment in a way that's going to change the next generation of children's safety. And I haven't even talked about children's safety, but you get it. It's the foundations for their safety is the caregivers. It's the mums and the dads and the uncles and the aunts and the grandparents. They're the safety. They're the front line. The services sector after that will follow the culture that we build there. And so we need to build that culture. We need to build it well. And currently, it's not being built well in our health system, in the Department of Health. And it's not being built well in the Department of Social Services in that particular small 5%. We do a little bit there. My research and my background says that in an area where you've done nothing, that's the highest up, potential growth. Highest potential growth is where there's nothing being done. So let's invest in that space and measure if that's true or not. We might get it wrong, but I think most of you know that if we invest in that space, we're not going to get no return on our investment. Most of the research says, I think it's $193 or something to $1. So that's all I've got to say for now. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for all that you do. I think you are a big part of the domino effect that we've been talking about for National Child Protection Week. I was prepared for the tear thing. Tom already made me cry last week, so I was there. So thank you, and thank you for sharing so freely a little part of yourself and your journey. I think one of our previous themes was children thrive when their parents are supported, and I'm looking at Annette from Frameworks Institution because she helped us come up with that. I think that it's really important. We've got to really value the importance of parents. Okay, now to someone who I'm very proud to welcome. Nuria, I don't know if you want to sit down or whether you want to come up to the podium. Nuria is a young person on our Youth Advisory Council, and I just want to reflect, Nuria, what does it feel like and what's the importance of young people voices being heard, and what does it look like for you or feel like for you when it's really meaningful?
Morning. Lil said, you can sit down, stand up or dance. Some parts of me wants to dance, but I won't right now. But thanks so much everyone for coming this morning. It is so incredible. I have to say I'm already so inspired by our speakers, by everyone who's shown up today and all the collective efforts that we've had for National Child Protection Week so far. I have to say it's so important that we talk about regulations and we talk about policies, but it's equally as important to listen to young people, have young people and children involved, and yeah, see what they have to say. So today I'm going to share a little bit about what I have to say. I have no idea how long I've got, but I'll go as far as I can. I arrived in Australia in 2018. That was 7 years ago and a bit, for the first time. And when I first arrived in Australia, although I was so grateful for all the opportunities and the fact that I could go to school because I come from Afghanistan. But before I come from Afghanistan and before the fact that I was deprived of my education, I lived in Pakistan as well. And because of several reasons, I could not go to school there as well. So I was very grateful for the fact that I could go to school in here and get the quality of education However, that being said, there was some factors that came in my life that prevented me from getting the best quality of education. That included family problems, all that settling here and the different environments, because obviously a whole different country, whole new people, and there were different ways of living, and then the family issues that we've had with people that really adored. My mom, we were not getting along anymore because of all the different what I saw in school, what I experienced outside my home. And I'm like, we're not back in the country, mom, leave me alone, like let me do what I want to do. And that was somewhat hurtful to me because that was my mom. She loved me and she still loves me. She cares about me. Um, that family issue, the different environment, and then I wanted to go to school and have a say. I wanted to educate people about what it means. You can still be who you are, not forget your identity, and then still be included and still go out there and advocate for issues that are impacting your community. But unfortunately, that's something that I wasn't able to do because of the very limited connections that I had as a newly arrived, and also my broken English. I could not speak English to save my life. And then, but I still had something inside me, and that was enthusiasm, passion, and that um, the yearn to be heard and to speak about your experiences and what might you need to settle well in this country and to have the life that you possibly deserve, because after all that you've been through. So I kept going around and I talked to everyone that I knew, my connections, like the first few people that I knew, and they had this program where you could go to this camping when you first arrived to Australia. You could go camping with other people who were new to this country as well, and you could connect with them, young people as well. And then I spoke to this lady who was leading that event, and I was like, this is so good. This is like a life-changing opportunity for me. I've never been outside my home alone. This is amazing. And my mom has allowed me because this is so inclusive. It's girls only, like going camping. Wow, that's like the first step, the first step for me to gain my independence. And then she was like, yeah, like, and I told her about all the issues, the systematic issues, but also social and personal issues in life. And I spoke about all those issues, and then she said, do you want to be in a youth advisory group? I was like, yeah, like, I have been looking for that for like a year now. I need to speak somewhere. I need to include myself and like have a say about what the issues that are impacting me, because clearly I'm not getting the best quality of education. I'm not having the best life that I want to have right now. And that's for reasons. Now I would love that. And I got involved in youth advisory groups. We can sit here and talk all day about how to effectively engage young people and how to collaborate with young people effectively. But essentially, as someone who was new to this country, as someone who had so many diverse needs, I had to make my way up. I had to speak in the youth advisory groups, but it's not just a matter of once you're in the advisory group, and that was a community youth advisory group within Brisbane that I'm in, and it's not just a matter of just being in that group. You have to constantly articulate your views, which, as you can imagine, for me was hard. First, because I was young. Second, because English wasn't my language, and there was other stuff. But long story short, I was really happy that I was included, and I was really happy that I could finally start somewhere. And then through that, they obviously, their normal general rule, they threw opportunities around for you to get involved in other stuff, and I always went for everything because that's just what I do. And then luckily, I got to be in NAPCAN Youth Speak Out, NISO it's called for short, this organization that's hosting this event. And I remember the first ever meeting that was face to face, and I felt so anxious and nervous. I got to Sydney for the first time. Can you guys believe? Like, I went camping, and then I got to Sydney for the first time by myself. And then I met the youth advisory group in there, and everyone was so articulate about what they wanted and their views. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've heard so many people. And mind you, when I was in Brisbane in that other youth advisory group, I was in so many meetings I attended to hear, and it was always elderlies with their views about what protects children, what protects young people, and that's amazing. But I have barely, like, I was probably one of the youth representatives that pushed myself in there, and I was like, I need to be in here. But yeah, I remember being in that first, and I want to mention this because this is a really highlight moment for me. I remember being in that first NISO meeting, and I was so nervous to speak. So they wanted to hear from young people. NAPCAN wanted to hear from young people. So they throw questions out there, and I was so nervous to express my views. And then Anne was also there. Yeah. And just no, it was actually earlier than that. Yeah, she was there, and we were standing around this board, and asked, what's the one thing, if you had one message, or if you had one thing that you want to pass on to the parliament or just the huge politicians, what's the one thing you want to say as a young person? And I remember being so nervous and unsure whether I should say that or not. And then I was like, I want them to know that the same strategy or the same approach is not going to work out for all the young people. Young people need to involve, and they need to be heard. And then key highlight moment, a few years after, I met Anne again at the Attorney General's Youth Summit that I was in, and she mentioned exactly that one quote of mine. And I felt so proud, but I also felt like I was hurt, you know. But yeah, so far, I'm not gonna, like, I can tell you all about how the next thing I did, but basically, as a young person, I had to find my way up there. I had to look for opportunities where, unfortunately, we had a system that wasn't fully developed for young people to have opportunities and be heard, and child protection or just in general, and make my way up there. But then this year's theme, I think it speaks a lot about that. Every conversation turns into actions. I was able to be one of those young people who would constantly have conversations and remind the adults that it's their responsibility, but also their responsibility to include young people. But as young people, we have a lot to say about what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And I think you can just take that and interpret it in any way. But when you get young people involved, you will understand things better, rather than speaking on behalf of, which I understand that sometimes it is organizationally structured like that, you best decide what's for young people. But I think just generally speaking, all the time, it's really important and essential to have young people involved. That's pretty much all I'm going to say for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Nuria. And that is the same young person who was at a really large conference. I think it was up in Gold Coast, and walked down the front and said, "Hey, where are all the young people here? Where are the young people on the panels? Where are the young people on the organisation committee?" And I think after that, you were on the organisation committee. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the other funny things that I heard, Nuria, and she certainly found her voice, she was at another conference and she said, well, the reason that you need to listen to us is because you all probably did a course in 1995 and things change. Um, so, and she didn't mean that with any disrespect, but I think that I'm really glad that you've found your voice, Nuria, and we're all a lot wiser for that. I know that we're just going a little bit over time, but I want to introduce our previous, I guess you're retired now, acting, well, retired from the Acting Children's Commission, our first national Aboriginal Children's Commissioner. I think a lot of you have probably had the pleasure to be able to meet Lil Gordon. Lil has been that face that has been everywhere in the time that she's been in that position. I mean, she did a NAIDOC week event for us, and she was obviously in the hotel foyer, and she was doing the webinar. She was acknowledging, I think, maybe 20 or 30 people as they were walking through, and I think that that says a lot about Lil. She's a multitasker, and we've all been much better in this space because we've had Lil. Over to you, Lil, just to tell us a little bit about your journey.
I don't know, I feel like I should do something different but stand behind here, but we'll go with the role. Look, I certainly want to start by acknowledging country, acknowledging that we're on the lands of the Gadigal people and paying my respects to elders past and present. And I want to start by just getting everybody to think about a place that's really important to you. A place that you could be going for years with the family, a place you could be going just to be that person to sit next to a tree, to listen to the birds. I want you to have a think about what do you see there? What are the things that you might see? Is it the ocean? Is it the river? Are there kids playing? Is the family around? What can you really see when you're there? What are some of the things that you can hear? Can you hear the rustling of the trees? Get out of the trees, Russell. You know, what can you hear in those spaces? You know, you can hear the chatter, you can hear the laughter, you can hear the crying, you can hear the joy. What are some of the smells? Is it off the ocean? Is it off the river, the trees themselves, the food that you might be sharing? What can you taste? What's in the air? And importantly, who do you remember when you're at those places? What are the long-term memories that you have when you're there? What does it mean to you to be there? So when we often talk about country, we're talking about that. We're talking about when you're at place, how does it feel being part of that place? And for me, and we think about Child Protection Week, and protection's a double-loaded word for us from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander context. But, you know, certainly thinking about, for us, also when you're there, do you think about who's been there before you? And I often talk to people about our communities. We had our kids running around everywhere. We had our families together. We had a whole stack of people bringing our children up in a very happy, you know, safe environment. We had that, and we still have that a lot now. Are there some things going astray? Absolutely. And there is things we need to do about that, very much so, because we can't let those things slide while we see over here things are working. But I encourage you, just when you're at those places again next time, is just sitting and thinking about when you hear kids laughing, when you hear them crying even, when you see them talking, sharing stories with each other, that's what child protection is. That's what it is, because that's our ultimate aim. That our kids to be happy, our kids to be able to be nurtured, our kids to be able to feel as though they belong in every possible way. And whether that means that they're crying, whether that means they're telling their story, whether it means those things where they're saying nothing, that's just as important as saying something. And that's really important for us to make sure that we do. Look, for me, I guess, yes, I've been in the Acting National Commissioner role. I'm not retiring. I've got a little ways to go. I'm not quite at the decades, but just to be clear, Anne, decades actually means eldership in our communities, right? So it's actually a really beautiful thing to be acknowledged like that. It acknowledges the time that people have and the eldership that you bring to the place. So I think I just got you off the hook there, Tom. So, you know, from that context, it's very much that wisdom that gets passed through, that it's innately there for us, and it's in our children. You know, I've got an 18-year-old, and the things that he knows and does and is, besides arguing with me very well, is innately there. It's there from my grandmother. I know that. You can see it, you can feel it, and the valuing of our children. So I don't often talk about child protection. I talk about child value, and that's the thing, because protection for us has meant removal on most often than not, or taking away. So protection is a double-edged sword from that perspective. So really important from us from that perspective. We talk about conversation. We don't often say, come have a conversation with me. It's come and have a yarn. And when we say yarn, it's because it has that open-ended space. It feels different when you say yarn versus conversation. Conversation feels a bit, you know, formal from my perspective. And it's having those yarns with people that you don't necessarily think are the ones around the table that you would sit with. All right. So it's important that we open up ourselves to be able to receive things differently in a way that we might not sit next to someone. Now, here's an example. How are you going?
I'm excellent. You?
I'm very, oh, hang on.
I'm excellent. How are you?
Excellent. That's good. So, you know, when I'm sitting with you, and I'll be honest, oftentimes, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and police, it's not seen as a good relationship, right? But in order to change that relationship and be that, we have to be able to sit with each other and talk openly about that. Can you tell me about, I don't know, something you've done fun of late?
Something I've done fun of late is put together a string of things with all my amazing people at work to celebrate this week and shine a light on all the work that gets done in this sector.
Absolutely. And that's, until we do this, until we sit in the cracks, until we understand each other in this way, we're never going to shift the dial in terms of what we need to do. So, at a later date, we might come across each other somewhere, we don't know where, and, we'll be able to acknowledge each other and move forward. So, I think that's what this is all about. But once we have the conversation and we get to know each other, we're more likely to do stuff together. And that's the difference. Yarns into action. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Lil, like a pro. We are running a bit over time because I haven't been very good at timekeeping. But what I would like to do is just go through the panel, and we'll start with you, Anne. And if you could just give us one takeaway about what an action is that you're doing or that you would like others to do upon reflection of this week.
Well, that's being put on the spot, isn't it? I reckon do what Lil just did. I reckon that's amazing. I think that to actually demonstrate that all it takes is you sit down with someone who maybe there might be some barriers to having that conversation with, recognizing that we're all human at the end of the day, and actually, even and I would say not even, especially members of Parliament. They do care about kids, right? They really do. Many of them really do care. But there are all these barriers to action. So have the conversation about what are the barriers to action and what can we do to get over those barriers.
Thanks, Anne. Thomas?
Yeah, I think just on reflecting, the thing to consider for me is kind of part B of what Lil was suggesting there, which is what I picked up on is like not judging who you're actually having that yarn with, and just that ongoing learning environment that you force yourself into. Like I'm no longer in this space, so I don't need to speak to anyone, but the person at the bus stop, or who goes to a bus stop anymore? No, sorry. Person, you know what I mean.
Where's
the person,
Ollie? He
yeah,
does
thank
all
you.
the time.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Essentially that we're in this community and we get to meet a whole bunch of different people, and whether you're at a medical appointment or here or there, that yarn, that was a really strategic yarn that you had, and I thought that was cool. And I think you still need to have those, but it's in the learning, being open to hearing, and kind of what Nuria was saying before around having a yarn with a child, like involve them and be able to learn from them. You're all leaders of leaders, but in so many ways, that everyone in your community shows leadership at different time, even my own children and your own children or your nieces and nephews. I think to overlook that would mean to miss out on some of those really incredible gold nuggets of wisdom that are on offer every day wherever we go.
Thanks, Thomas. Nuria?
Yeah, I would say the same thing, nothing new, to be honest. But yeah, engage with young people, whether it be on social level, in your day-to-day life, in the bus stop. Yeah, you can do that. If the young people and children are willing to talk to you about something, or just if you're a CEO here today, or just a manager or someone of a high level, get young people in your organization, get them involved, and have, I don't know how feasible that is, but that's very feasible. Like nothing is impossible. Get young people involved, have a youth advisory group, hear their views on your frameworks, on your policies and structures. I think, yeah, just in general, and reflect on this year's theme, which is have conversations with young people. That depends on what level, but yeah, always conversations and always involve young people.
And Lil, do you have anything else to add?
Look, I think it's that piece of just opening up ourselves to the possibility that a conversation, that an engagement, that being around the table can make a difference. And look, as much as you might turn up to the bus stop, that might find yourself in some other problems if you turn up too often in some sort of strange looking way in it all. But from my perspective, it is creating those spaces where young people feel safe to be able to have conversations that they need to have. And they get to determine who comes into those spaces, not necessarily us. So often we find young people are waiting for us to come and have those conversations, and we need to think differently about how young people have those conversations around those tables themselves, and then how do they do that. And then the other thing is what people said matters in a way that then we go, okay, the burden shouldn't be on young people. It absolutely shouldn't be on young people to keep telling their story, keep bringing that up every single time if we don't do something about it collectively. And I think that's the space that we really need to think about. What does the action look like, and how do we collectively do that? But to believe it's possible, you know, it's got to be in the hearts and minds of people that work in those systems, and it's going to take the courage and the bravery of those people in those systems to do that change.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And in the vein of being able to have a yarn, there's a few young people from our Youth Advisory Council here, and they have just kicked off a media campaign. I'm just going to put your hand up, Ollie. You might want to have a yarn with him, and it's about fair youth coverage, and that is what in the media, and that's what the young people in NAPCAN wanted to highlight. So they've just started a campaign about that. They're going to have 100 youth voices in 100 days about all these fabulous young people, and we want to just flood the social media with positive stories about youth. I just can see online that this year's designer of this artboard, Karina Jeffries, shout out to you, Karina. I can see that you're online, and I just wanted to say it's beautiful, and you can download that on our website. I also wanted to say a big thank you to Commander Helen Schneider from the ACE, and which is broadcasting this image over the ACE for the week, along with the University of South Australia. And what I will do is we're just going to play a clip, which was a launch from the Governor-General, so I'll get the panel members to come back. And then I think Sarah will be putting the Zoom link in. And so after the Governor-General's clip finishes, you can click on the Zoom link and you can have an opportunity to talk to Lil and Anne, and we can go into the breakout rooms. But before I do that, I also want to say a huge thank you to Life Without Barriers and to Melinda Clark, who made this venue completely possible. So I really appreciate the support of Life Without Barriers.
Hello everyone. I'm speaking to you today from Government House in Yarralumla in Canberra, on the lands of the Ngunnawal people, where I pay my respects to elders past and present. As patron of the National Association for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, I'm proud to join with NAPCAN during National Child Protection Week to share the message that protecting children is everyone's responsibility. For more than 30 years, NAPCAN has educated and empowered Australians to work together to prevent child abuse and neglect, hosting workshops and providing training, offering information and resources, and delivering projects nationwide. NAPCAN's focus is prevention and the safety and well-being of all children. And I'm delighted that NAPCAN will visit here at Government House later this year for the launch of your important Fair Youth Coverage campaign to raise awareness of NAPCAN's Youth Council's concerns about the way children and young people are portrayed in the media. NAPCAN's webinar series, running throughout National Child Protection Week, shares the tools and language to help children to be safe online and build healthy relationships, and important guidance on how to listen to children's voices as the most important perspective in youth-led advocacy. This week, NAPCAN reminds us that every conversation matters, but words alone are not enough. Prevention only begins when we turn dialogue into action. Proud Woolwonga Ulawun woman Karina Jeffries' beautiful design for the National Child Protection Week 2025 poster shows the footsteps of a child travelling towards safety and belonging. It is a powerful depiction of the journey of childhood and the opportunity we have as adults to build safer, connected communities where children and young people can thrive and grow and know that they are loved and that they matter. During National Child Protection Week, I welcome NAPCAN's leadership as we shift the conversation to action and work together to keep building communities that protect every child and young person from abuse and neglect.
Now I'd just like you to take the opportunity to go and have a yarn. There's some nibbles out there. There's a lot of really amazing people in this room who are doing amazing things, and I think often we don't take the time to actually connect and hear about what each other's doing. So if we can provide that opportunity for you to go and connect with someone that you may not know and hear a little bit about what they do, that would be great. I'm going to ask Anne and Lil to stay here and connect with, I think we've got over 500 people online at the moment. That could be a dreadful disaster, but bear with us. But what I will need to do is I will need to get everyone to move out and go into the area where we came. So thank you very much.